Welcome to another episode of The Evaluation Couch, the podcast where we talk about career growth and the field of evaluation. This is your host, Maria Montenegro. I want you to imagine that there's a new restaurant in your town that everyone is talking about. It is the restaurant that everyone wants to try. All of your friends have recommended that you go. So you go to the restaurant, they sit you in a table, and they hand you the menu. And you receive a menu with many pages. The owner of the restaurant is very detail-oriented. He has spent so much time training and has had so many experiences that have inspired his current restaurant. So he wants to share everything with his customers. Each dish has a very detailed description of all of the ingredients that were used, how they were cooked, what the inspiration was for the dish. The owner also wants to acknowledge everyone who was part of this experience. So every menu item includes a list of all of the people that were involved in coming up with the recipe and cooking the dish in his kitchen. You start going through the menu. There's about 30 menu items. But by the 6th or 7th item, you're pretty exhausted after reading so much. You end up being overwhelmed, so you ask the server to make a recommendation and to surprise you with something. They hand you the menu item, and it actually has radishes, which is the only item that you absolutely never eat. You end up not having such a great experience, even though there's probably some menu items that you would have loved. You received an encyclopedia of a menu, instead of what you usually see in restaurants that you love, which is a menu that describes the ingredients of a dish, maybe identifies some of the allergens that it might include so you can decide what to order and what not to order. Maybe comes up with a photo so that you can quickly make up an idea of what each of the dishes has. There are some menus that are a little bit more creative, and they may include a story behind them. They might have a title that is creative so that you can just skim through the titles and have an idea of what the flavor or type of dish it is. Usually when you go to a restaurant that you keep coming back to, you receive a menu that is effective and concise. I want you to think of your application for a job like a menu. When we tend to include all of our experiences, we might end up creating the equivalent of an encyclopedia menu, instead of a menu that is effective, concise, that gets the job done, and that helps the client identify why they like to be in that restaurant and what is the dish that they need on that specific day. In today's episode, we're going to talk about tailoring your job application. I want you to picture in your head a Venn diagram. The first circle is everything that you bring into the table. Your amazing training, education, your experience, your lived experience, skills, specific projects you've worked on, and all of your accomplishments. On the other hand, you have a circle that encompasses everything the company is. The company's challenges and the problems they're trying to solve with this specific position that is available. And now I want you to bring them closer together. The areas of overlap between what you bring and what the company and the position requires. That little area that should not be the entirety of the circle because it's impossible. You're so much more than what this company is looking to fill with this position. But that little area of overlap, that is the area that is going to determine the content of your entire application. From the moment you start the process of selling yourself, the moment you send your resume, the moment you write your cover letter, when you're on a call for an interview, and even when you're negotiating. What you share, the story that you tell, the points that you make, and the examples you give throughout the hiring process have to come from that area of overlap between what you bring to the table and what is required for that position at that specific company. I have reviewed hundreds of resumes, and let me tell you, tailoring your application is a number one advice for any job searching resource, article online, webinar, any career center is going to talk about tailoring your application. Yet, you would be surprised by how many people and how often it is for people to not tailor their application or not do it well. And why is this so important? Picture again, sitting in a restaurant with an encyclopedia menu, except that menu is competing with many other menus that are more concise, more effective, and more relevant. If you're hungry and need to eat, you're most likely going to prioritize the menus that are more effective and are going to solve your problem quicker and faster, especially if you're busy and you need to keep going on with your day. In preparing for this episode, I wanted to learn more about why, even though tailoring your application is probably the number one advice out there when it comes to job searching, why is there still a gap and why do people fail? I recognize that applying for jobs is a skill in itself, and it's a skill that we don't necessarily get taught in school. But there's also more than that. There are also forces, beliefs, and thoughts that get in the way of us applying what we know, which is the importance of tailoring our application. So I want to dig a little bit deeper into what those might be. The first one is the fear of omitting information that is crucial. What if in the process of making my application concise, I leave important information out that would change the outcome of whether I'm successful or not in this application? And that is a very valid concern. We definitely do not want to remove important information that shows you're a valuable candidate for this position. But luckily, addressing this is pretty easy. If you have a strong understanding of what this position and this company is looking for, there's no chance you're going to leave crucial information out. You're going to know and be able to filter what is relevant and what is not. And how do you get there? The first step is focusing on the job posting. The job posting describes what is required for that position. And the second thing you're going to focus on is the company itself. This information might be included in the job posting as well. What is the company's values? What is their mission? What is their culture like? Oftentimes, you will have to do extra research to find out this information. The second thing that might be getting in the way of tailoring our application is feeling insecure. Feeling that imposter syndrome, feeling like we need to overcompensate because we do not meet all the qualifications or we don't think that our experience is good enough. This is why, before starting to talk about applying for jobs, I had a whole series on healthy job search mindset. And if you haven't heard those episodes, I strongly encourage you to, especially the one about focusing on our strengths. When we are not confident on our strengths and the value that we bring to the table, we can easily go all over the place because we're trying to prove that we deserve an opportunity. This can lead to over-exaggerating experiences, especially experiences that are not necessarily important. It can lead to focusing on skills that are not our strongest and therefore we're not able to speak confidently and convincingly about. And it can all lead to detracting the person reading our application or hearing about us from what is really important and where the areas of strength and the value that we add are. It's very important before you go into the application process that you have a strong understanding of your strengths and your accomplishments to avoid feeling insecure and avoid feeling this imposter syndrome. Another thing getting in the way might be that we feel like a resume has to be exhaustive. It needs to be an entire record of everything we've done in our lives. Now, just superficially, I want to note that a resume and a CV are different things. Depending on the position you're applying to, you might want to prepare a CV, which tends to be a more exhaustive review of everything you have accomplished, especially from an academic lens, such as publications, presentations, courses that you have taken or that you have facilitated. While there might be circumstances in which you do have to provide an exhaustive overview of what you have accomplished, normally when you're applying for a job, you don't. Resumes do not have to be exhaustive. A brief, tailored resume has more chances of getting you an interview than several pages of a resume with everything you have accomplished that the human resources department or the hiring manager are probably not going to have time to read. Thinking back to the fact that people will spend less than 8 seconds on your resume before they decide whether to give you an interview. Being concise is very important. You also have to think about what story you're telling about your skills without explicitly talking about your skills. When you send a resume that is all over the place, extremely detailed, and covers relevant and irrelevant information about you, what does that say about your ability to be concise and communicate effectively, and of your ability to understand your audience? Especially if these things are required for the position you're applying for, sending a resume like this already showcases the most relevant skills for the position in a non-favorable way. Lack of certainty about the relevant skills and experiences to share on your resume could also be a factor playing a role in you not tailoring your applications. When we are applying for jobs, one of the things that we want to do is to show that we're interested. We want to show that we're interested in that specific position with that company and that we're a good match. Starting by demonstrating that you do not clearly understand what is required for that job or what is important for that company is not a good step towards that direction. It is important that you fill in the gaps about what are the skills and experiences that are relevant for this position. And there's a few things that you can do. The job posting is always going to be my number one recommendation. What does the job posting say about the position, the skills, the qualifications, and the type of tasks that are going to be involved in the position? But sometimes the job posting is not detailed enough or is not sufficient. Other things that you can do is doing additional research about that specific field or that type of position in other companies that are similar. Doing additional research about the company, its mission, values, culture. And you might also want to consider doing informational interviews with previous or current employees in that organization, or people that have a similar role in another organization. And lastly, another common thing that I even fall for constantly is being attached to previous accomplishments that are very important for us and that might not be relevant anymore. But they are things that we're proud of, and it's difficult to let go and remove them from our application. If you identify that this is something you're struggling with, it's important to remember that people will spend a small amount of time reading your application. And sharing irrelevant accomplishments is going to be a distraction. When we identify there's information in our resume, in our cover letter, or in the story we're telling people that is clutter, that is just there because it meant something at a specific point of time, but is no longer relevant or not relevant for the people that are hearing us, I think we can be honest about this. We can appreciate that accomplishment, thank it, and let it go. I can give you a specific example that I've really struggled to let go. I completed my master's program in 2016. My master's thesis won 2 awards from associations in agricultural economics in the US and in Canada. It was a big accomplishment, especially to have one same thesis acknowledged by these 2 different organizations on the same year. This is an accomplishment that I'm very proud of. And I realized that in all of my applications, this accomplishment is still at the very top within my education section, even though these associations are in a field that I no longer practice in. Yes, it sounds nice to say that I won 2 awards, but do people really know what these associations are? Does it mean much to people, especially when I'm applying to jobs in healthcare, for management, in evaluation? Sometimes it doesn't. So what I've had to do is thank these awards and accomplishments because they played a role in the story that I told in the first jobs I had after my master's program. But letting them go because they're no longer relevant, or at least not relevant enough to deserve the front of my resume and applications. So we started this episode with what it is that we're trying to do when we're applying for jobs to actually make our application tailored. But now I want to get into a hands-on demonstration of how to do that. How would you actually go about tailoring your story and your application for a job? I am going to show you a few artificial intelligence enabled tools that you can use in this process. So what I did for this episode, and I'm going to be fully transparent, I hope you trust me, this is what I did. I went into Indeed US because I wanted to find a new job posting I've never seen. So I typed evaluation manager. I clicked on the first job that had a title related to what I do now, but a different company and opportunity. I ended up with an evaluation manager job posting in New York. The link of this position is in the notes of this episode. I do not know anything about this organization. It was the first one that came up in my search. So I am not promoting this job in any way. I'm just using it to showcase how I would go about tailoring my application for this position. Now, conveniently for me, this position has a bit of a different focus than what I do in my current work right now. So it's actually going to be a really good example of how I would change my story to tailor it for this job and this company. The first thing that I'm going to do is take a look at the job posting. Job postings usually have subtitles that can help you guide and identify what information is there. This one has a general description that describes the organization, what it does, what their mission is. And then it talks a little bit more about this specific position. And then it goes over who it reports to and what a candidate in this position will do. It includes things like assisting in the development of program evaluation measures and documentation tools, with an emphasis on data management and analysis, statistical programming, data coding, entry and editing, technical report writing, and library research. It also says that this position is going to develop and maintain a resource pool, and it will provide consultation services on research design and reporting methodologies. It has a section with bullet points related to other duties that the job will entail. It has a section on qualifications. The qualification section usually has most of the content that will be in that overlap area between what you bring and what the organization is looking for. So in this case, it says master's degree, at least 3 to 6 years of experience in evaluation, a PhD may be relevant, a background in statistics. It also says possession of the core competencies required at the time of hire. And there's another section called core competencies that describes what all of those are. And some of the things included there include developing and collaborating on programs to meet the statistical needs of a large funded project, providing consultation to partners, knowledge of statistical program packages, designing data entry templates and data collection codes, doing preliminary data analysis, communicating effectively, and so on. So as I said, the job description is definitely a must read. It has a lot of information there. One exercise that I encourage people do when they are reviewing a job posting, especially if it is one that you're super interested in, is to highlight with different colors the different keywords and skills that are named in the job description. Use, for example, green to highlight the technical skills, things like statistical programming, coding, developing data collection tools, and then using a different color for transferable skills. These are skills that are not specific to a field or a type of job and that you can develop in different experiences, but then translate them into this specific job. So these will be things like communication skills, collaboration skills, and you can highlight them with a different color. I like to have a third different color that highlights specific keywords that represent values, the people that you will be working with. So let's assume that in the job posting, there are words such as equity deserving groups or community partners. So in this specific job posting, some of the words that I would highlight in a different color, say pink, would be underrepresented scientists, community partners. I would highlight FERPA and HIPAA regulations, research grants, project staff, and internal and external constituents. This process of highlighting the skills and the keywords in the job posting are going to be crucial in the next steps of your application. In the next step, you are going to focus on which of those you have. Do you need to have all of them? Absolutely not. You do not need to comply with all of the qualifications listed in the job posting. But you do want to show as much as you can that you meet what this position is looking for. If I was super interested in this position, I would go even farther than that. I would start doing research about the company, about the specific team where this evaluation manager is going to be working. Maybe I would contact a few people that have worked there or work there currently to learn more about what problems this position is trying to solve so that I can tailor my application even further. Luckily for us, we now have artificial intelligence enabled tools that can help make this process easier and less resource intensive. And I am actually going to share a few of those. I'm going to show you how I would go about using artificial intelligence tools to make this process easier. And I'm going to continue building off of this example. I'm also going to compare a few tools that are available out there. I did not spend a lot of time trying to figure out all of the tools available. If you have been following my podcast, I have attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. One of the things that come with my ADHD is that complicated forms, trying to figure out complex systems is like a huge mountain that I need to climb over, and sometimes I just can't and my brain freezes, and that's okay. This aspect of me makes me a great tester of how user-friendly a platform is. So there is a possibility that I'm missing out on a few tools that are amazing, but have a higher learning curve to get in and even create an account. The ones that I'm going to recommend, they're easy to try out and adopt, and I only focused on free available versions and tools to make it more accessible and realistic. One thing to keep in mind as you're exploring how to adopt artificial intelligence into your life and work is that they come with costs, and it's very easy for those subscriptions and memberships to add up. So I want to give you free options to avoid this. Okay, so the first thing that I would do is leverage Copilot. Copilot is the artificial intelligence chatbot that I use. Although the job posting does have a description about the company, I am going to use it to learn a little bit more and find information that I could use for my application. So the question that I'm going to ask is, what are the mission and values of the company name? Here I'm adding the company of this job position that I'm linking in the episode notes. And I received a description of the mission, which was already in the job description with links. That's why I like Copilot. It's easy to click on the link and verify the information. And then it includes 3 values: innovation, integrity, and service. There are some organizations that really walk the talk with regards to their values. In reading these values, the first thing that jumps out to me is that integrity is actually one of my top values. So there is a match there that I could probably talk about and highlight in an interview or even in a cover letter. The next question that I asked is, what are some recent events or projects of this company that can be relevant for my job application? I got a few interesting recent events that could be relevant for my application. They had a record high external research awards in 2024. They celebrated their 10th anniversary. They have Wednesday Brown Bag Research webinars and a healthier food environment campaign. What I'm drawing from this is that this is a very well-established research center that has been around for many years. They probably have established processes because they have been around for a long time. I also like the idea of the webinars, and right away I'm wondering, would they be interested in having evaluation webinars? That is definitely something I've done in the past and something that I could offer. I am not aware of AI-specific services that would give you this level of information about the company. I definitely think Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude are the tools to use to find out more about recent events and the company itself. But there are several tools that you can use that will look at the job posting and will look at your application and help you tailor your application to that specific job posting. You can also leverage chat AI tools for that. So I'm going to keep using Copilot before introducing the other tools. And what I would do next is focus on identifying those keywords and specific skills that I need to identify. Now, I said that I would do this manually with highlighters, but these tools can do it quicker, and it can also be a way of validating the work that we have done to make sure that we did identify the main important skills. Where these tools can also be very helpful is in helping make sure that your application is applicant tracking system friendly. Applicant tracking systems are systems that organizations may use to scan applications and see whether you meet the requirements and see whether you are a good match for the position. Some organizations do use these systems to filter in resumes and identify who's going into the next stage of the application process. The next question that I would ask Copilot is, what are the top 10 keywords I should highlight to make sure my resume is applicant tracking system friendly? And what I would do is copy and paste the content of the job posting and see what it says. This is the answer that I am getting. To make your application ATS friendly for the evaluation manager position at this organization, this is the list that I got. Program evaluation, data management, statistical programming, data analysis, research design, SAS and SPSS, health disparities, NIH research grants, FERPA and HIPAA compliance, and technical report writing. That is 10 keywords that I got right away by asking Copilot. I wanted to show you an example of 2 other tools that I used. Again, the tools that I found that were easy to navigate that do a similar thing. I used Teal. Teal is a software where you can upload your resume, you can upload job positions, it tracks job positions you're interested in, and it has a feature that highlights the top skills, which in this case would be equivalent to keywords you want to highlight in your application. In the episode descriptions, you will also have a link to a post where I'm showing what the results look like in each of these tools, so you can have a visual comparison of what they are. Teal highlighted data, program evaluation, coding, data files, data management, and the rest of the skills you have to upgrade and pay for a membership to see. But nonetheless, those are 5, and it actually shows you how frequently they come up in the job posting. The other tool that I found was JobScan. This tool works in a similar way. You can upload or copy paste a job description. What I like about this tool is that it gives you more tips for applicant tracking system friendly document applications than only the keywords. It will actually inform you of whether it's being able to find your education, relevant job titles, your contact information easily. It gives you tips on the type of document that you should upload that is preferred for applicant tracking systems, and so on. So it's informative to just see some of the things that it looks for. And then it actually gives you hard skills, soft skills, and other keywords, which I found is a lot more comprehensive. And this is the free version, so pretty insightful. Some of the hard skills that it showed up was program evaluation, coding, editing, consultation, data collection, SPSS, and data analysis. As you can see, there is overlap between Copilot's results, Teal's, and JobScan. Some of the skills that come up in all of them are data analysis, data management, statistical programming, and program evaluation. In terms of soft skills, JobScan identifies confidentiality, committed, innovative, which actually came up as one of the values when we asked Copilot, and cooperative. And then there's a list of other keywords, some of which I had mentioned that I would highlight in pink. So things like minorities, disparities, and grants. What I like of JobScan is that it will show you how many times these words come up in the job description and whether it comes up in your resume or not and how many times. As you can see, you have options that you can leverage to help you identify keywords and skills to make your application more relevant and tailored for that position. Teal and JobScan are focused on helping you develop a resume that is more aligned with what the job's looking for. They have features like AI-enabled tools to help you word your content differently. I'm not going to go into details on that because it's important that you understand how to do the process first before you're actually using AI tools. Now that there's so much use of AI-enabled tools, it is easier for recruiters and people reading applications to identify when something has been developed by an AI. I strongly encourage you to leverage these tools for brainstorming, for validation, to identify keywords, but to make sure that you are writing the content and the content sounds human, that it sounds like you, because there's definitely a trend happening on the other side of the application process of being able to identify patterns of AI written applications, and it's probably not going to help your case if those reading your application cannot tell what is you and what is an AI tool. Now that we have understood more about the company, the keywords and skills that should be highlighted in the application, the last thing that I'm going to showcase is how you can use AI-enabled tools to define what is in that overlap area between what you bring and what the company is looking for. For that, I'm going to use Copilot again. I'm going to add a version of my resume that I have. It's actually my CV. It just has a bunch of information about all of the things that I've done. And what I'm going to say is, here is my resume, match the top 3 skills I should highlight in my application for this role. You can copy and paste the role. You can also upload a document, or if you're in the same conversation as before, it will already know that we're talking about the same position. These are the top 3 skills that it is identifying as being part of that overlap area. It also gives me a little bit of a narrative explaining what my experience is and some suggestions. So I think this is actually pretty great. This is what it takes. The first skill that it's highlighting is program evaluation. And it says you have extensive experience in program evaluation as demonstrated by your roles in these different companies. You can highlight specific projects, such as your evaluation of the COVID-19 response in your organization and your evaluation of the early care and learning and recruitment and retention strategy in British Columbia. The second area is data management and analysis. And it says your proficiency in data management and analysis is evident from your work with statistical programming, data coding, entry, and editing tools. Emphasize your experience with statistical software like SAS or SPSS, as well as your ability to design data entry templates and conduct preliminary data analysis. And the last area is technical report writing. Your ability to synthesize findings and prepare high-quality reports is crucial for the role. This is supported by your work in different places, such as this and this employer that I've had. It also recommends that I mention experience in writing technical reports for various stakeholders, including executive leaders and government clients. Given what I know that my CV has, I can attest that all of the areas that it's telling me to focus on are indeed areas that I have experience on and that I have used these skills in the past. After reading the job posting and also seeing the top 10 skills and keywords highlighted by Copilot, by Teal, and by JobScan, it is suggesting that I focus on 3 areas that are important and relevant for this position. All in all, it's pretty good. And I know you might be thinking only 3 skills, but if you think about it, most people do not do any matching or tailoring at all. So having 3 areas where you can show strong alignment can really make you stand out. And I want to discuss what I would do next with this information. If I was applying for this job and I would be starting with this document, the first thing that I would notice is that I actually do not have any matches of the word program evaluation. I know that in my day-to-day, I use more of the language of evaluation without the program. I also know that I'm actually part of grants, that are evaluation grants, but they do not have the word program evaluation in their title. So I'm not surprised by this. However, if I want to increase the chances that my resume is picked up on terms of keywords, I need to replace some of those evaluation terms with program evaluations. That's an easy find and replace change. The second thing that I would do is I would focus on highlighting more of the data analysis, management, and statistical programming experience that I have. I have many examples that I can use and highlight. My resume and my CV right now probably do not emphasize as much on that technical and statistical expertise because I've been focused more on leading a team, supervising, developing and implementing an evaluation and research strategy. However, I have several examples that I can highlight that demonstrate I actually do have that statistical experience, and it was actually also my graduate training. One example that I would right away change is in the description of my current employment, I would add a point talking about a specific project we just completed where I supervised a team conducting an analysis of a community-based survey where we used R. And this is a project that I led. I reviewed all of the codes. I ensured that we followed all data cleaning protocols and that we had good documentation of our statistical analysis. I would make a specific case of pointing out the different statistical programs within the different projects that I've worked on. So in the case of this recent experience, we used R. In other evaluation projects within my organization, I have used SPSS. And in the past, the software that I was using was Stata. I would add those words within the description of my experiences. And lastly, one thing that I would do is I would include the word technical reports. Because of my current work, I know that a word that I use a lot is knowledge translation. I use things like knowledge product, and that has a specific meaning and connotation in health research. However, to have a match with this specific job, I would replace all of those with technical reports. And I would make sure that I am very explicit about who the different audiences for those reports are, including executive leaders, partners, government departments, and the public. To go the extra mile, I would specify different research grants that I have been a part of, including the reporting requirements that I have completed for them. I would also specify projects that I've worked on where the focus has been addressing health disparities and ensuring that research activities are compliant with privacy regulations. Because I don't work in the US, I actually cannot include the specific keywords related to FERPA and HIPAA, for example, because that would not be true. Those are not regulations that I have had to follow, but there are similar regulations in Canada, so I would be explicit about those. That is how I would use the different pieces of information from the job posting and AI tools to tailor my application and prioritize what type of content and story I am going to tell for this specific job. In this episode, I describe why it is important to tailor our applications, the importance of having an application that is concise and effective instead of an encyclopedia version of an application. We also reviewed a few reasons why we tend to go against the advice of being concise and how you might go about addressing some of those reasons. And finally, I showed you how I would use different AI tools to tailor my application and identify what type of content I would include if I was applying to this evaluation manager job. I hope that this was helpful and it gave you some ideas of tools that you can adopt to improve how tailored your applications are. If you know someone that is currently applying for work and you think this content would be helpful, feel free to share this episode. And if you try any of these tips and you find them helpful, please let me know. If you have other AI tools that you have found helpful, also share with me, and we can make sure that we'll cover them in future episodes.